Yo, YouTube. Oh my goodness, finally, the Call of Duty League, the inaugural season of the Call of Duty League, a whole new era for competitive CoD, finally got underway this weekend, and a lot went down. Of course, before we even get into it, I want to say it was awesome meeting anybody and everybody who came up to me while at the event. Obviously, I was working it, and it was awesome meeting you guys. It really was an awesome event. I actually just tweeted this, but like, it was awesome to go to the event and then come out of it really optimistic for the future of the CDL, because I definitely had my questions. I had my questions going into it. I know we talked about this quite a bit the past few months, or, you know, really the past year leading into the CDL, but I'm really optimistic moving forward with this format, the tournament format now that we're going to be seeing in London in 2 weeks. It's going to be awesome. So there is a lot of intro to this video because I also got a chance to meet Gary V as well, which was an awesome, kind of a dream of mine the past, like, 18 months or so, when I really started digging into his content a lot. And like, Gary V's been so inspirational for me with how I've formulated this channel and created content the past year and a half or so. When I heard that he was getting into the scene, like, it felt like destiny. Like, I really started becoming like a truther for Gary V in the past like 6 months before that. Then he joins in with the CoD League. So man, like, literally so awesome to meet him. He's so genuine, and he gave me some good advice as well, so I really do appreciate that. This is going to be a long video, like I said, but we're going to be talking about everything else in the Best of 3 podcast. That'll be coming out Wednesday night, so I really would appreciate you guys if you showed that some love as well, and we're getting into it. So finally, oh my goodness, finally, we're getting into the actual video, but there was so much to talk about since I hadn't posted a video in a few days, and we've been in Minnesota. So with that said, let's get into it. The broad perspective of the CoD League first event, like I said, it was really good. I think overall the competition was really fun. Upstairs in the Armory in Minnesota was where the pros were playing. Downstairs was where the challengers was. The challengers, we're going to talk more about that on the podcast, but like, I wasn't totally happy with how that was organized and everything and how it was treated. But the upstairs, the pros, was awesome. The setup was really good. I know there was some scheduling problems, but the competition, the home stand feel was really fun, and it got me really excited for the future of home stands and how that's going to go down in the CoD League. So I'm really looking forward to that. The other news that happened right before I was leaving, so I couldn't make a video about it, is that the CoD League is officially on YouTube now. YouTube signed a deal with Activision for the streaming rights to the CoD League and the Overwatch League. So that's pretty big for Call of Duty moving forward. I think it's a good deal overall. I mean, and as someone who makes most of my content on YouTube, I'm personally pretty happy about it. But I think as a move for the CoD League, it's gonna make sense in the long term. And there's a lot of casual CoD fans that watch content on YouTube that don't watch on Twitch. And so I think for CoD, it makes a lot of sense overall. Maybe not as much for Overwatch, but for CoD, really happy about that. So we can talk about basically every team if we really wanted to, but we're going to go through some of the biggest highlights and the biggest storylines of the weekend. There was the Huntsmen versus OpTic, the FaZe versus Empire, the Huntsmen versus Empire matches all over the weekend. And there were some really big surprises overall, lots of upsets. When I say a lot, I mean a lot of upsets when it came to what we expected based off the power rankings, previous to this event. And I mean, it showed online warriors do exist in some sense. I'm not calling anybody out, but there is a difference from playing online to playing on LAN, and it definitely matters early in your career, like what we saw with Empire this event. I mean, Shotzzy had a rough go at things. Illy had a decent event at least, but it does make a difference when you're playing against a veteran team like the Huntsmen, who have done this 1,000 times, versus a guy like, Shotzzy, who hasn't had this big of a stage in his career and is new to the CoD scene as a whole. So we'll dive into that match in just a second, but there's so many teams that we can talk about here. Okay, so let's just start with the biggest surprises of the weekend, because there were some big ones. Like I said, big time upsets, and teams that we thought were going to turn out and play pretty well did not play well at all. Let's start off with the biggest one. Seattle Surge looked horrible, like terrible. And when they got that roster, you got so many big names on that roster, you have to be worried. It seemed like they were ultra tilted. Octane looked pissed at the end of that match. And in London, they've got a tough pool as well. They got Chicago, Dallas, and they've got the LA Guerillas, which look like a decent team now, at least. They're in tough shape moving into London as well, so not ideal. If you're a Seattle Surge fan, you gotta be really worried about this team moving forward. Obviously, you expect Octane to dominate, and then after that, there's a lot of inconsistencies. And Enable did not look good. He looked really bad in search, especially. Seemed like he didn't know where he was going. The biggest problem with this event, though, is that most teams didn't practice search and destroy barely at all. Maybe they had strats, maybe they had plays, they had setups. But, I mean, it's going to take time for these teams to figure things out when it comes to search. So you know, again, this is only 2 matches. You can't take that much from this, and it's going to take time and a handful of events and weekends for us to really get a good feel of where teams are actually at, and teams are going to get better over time. But we definitely did learn something, and Seattle is in a tough spot right now with their roster. I think it just doesn't make that much sense right now with how they're going to be playing. I don't really like them in almost any matchup right now. So right now, Surge is the team I'm the most worried about and most surprised about based off this weekend, because they lost in map 5, both against the Mutineers and against the Ultra, which, you know, again, the Mutineers are a decent team. The Ultra maybe are a decent team, but they're by no means a top 5 team. They couldn't take Search and Destroys off these guys. That's a real problem. Search and Destroy is going to be tough for them moving forward. We'll see what happens with that roster, and maybe they make some changes down the road, but they're probably the team I'm going to keep the closest eye on the next few weeks, because changes could potentially happen. Next up in the surprises, I guess, is LA OpTic. I know a lot of people did go in with really low expectations for OpTic. I'm not surprised, but at the same time, Tej and JCap had a horrible 2 days. They looked terrible, and you hate to see it, but it just feels like that team is just so out of sync right now. I would love to see Dashy in just a more aggressive role. Right now, it feels like he's playing really slow, and Slasher and him are trying to like play that together, but Tej and JCap just feel so out of place. I don't know how this roster of 5 is going to be able to get over that. I'm not going to give up hope on this roster right now. You know how much individual talent these guys have. It just depends on whether or not they can figure out how to play as a team. I mean, the obvious low-hanging fruit is that you kick JCap off the roster and sub in somebody else, whoever it is, one of the 2 subs. You know, that's an option, but I wouldn't expect that soon. I mean, OpTic's got a long road ahead to get better. They're not playing in London, though, so they don't play until Atlanta. So they got a few weeks here to figure things out, which is why I'm not horribly worried about them right now compared to, like, Seattle, who has to play in, you know, 10 days or whatever in a pool against the Huntsmen and Dallas. So that's why I'm a lot more worried about Seattle. Another team with some major problems right now is New York. Like, holy cow, they looked so bad. All right, they got 3-0 just absolutely clapped by London, who then got clapped by Paris. And after that match against London, you knew what was going to go down against Atlanta. But at the same time, New York at least looked competitive in that series. The hard point was like a 40-point game, and then they won the domination. On Piccadilly, they played Search on Piccadilly and looked like completely clueless. They looked horrible. And I actually just saw that Attach tweeted they basically hadn't played it or didn't even make any strats for it or any setups for it, which makes no sense. Then, like, why didn't you ban it? You know, like, I have no clue why they wouldn't have setups for Piccadilly and then not ban it. So I'm not sure what was up with that tweet, but at the same time, of course, they looked at least a little bit competitive in this series. So at least there's some silver lining there. I mean, for New York to get 3-0'd by London and then London goes and gets smoked by Paris, that's pretty concerning, where you just don't know how good those teams are at that point. I had talked about in the podcast that I thought the New York-London match would be really telling about where those teams are at. And then London 3-0'd, I'm like, oh wow, London's the real deal. But then London goes and gets smoked by Paris? And so that was just really surprising. Those are the 3 teams I'm most interested in seeing the upcoming 2 weeks, because it doesn't feel like we have any clue actually how good they are at this point. And I just have a lot of questions about both London and New York at this point. And then, of course, I'm still wondering about how good Paris actually is. So those are 3 really interesting teams moving forward. I mean, that segments us into like the Paris talk specifically. I mean, Paris, they surprised beyond all expectations. Really blew them out of the water. They beat OpTic 3-2 in a really interesting, fun series. And then they 3-0'd London. And so, I mean, Paris, they looked really good as a whole. I'll be honest, they kind of feel like the real deal in a sense that they're going to be a competitive team year long. I don't want to hop on that too quickly, but based off what I saw, they really did look like a solid team. Looked like they played really sound Call of Duty. And I look forward to seeing what that team can do moving forward, because I think it could be a pretty fun opportunity for them to really surprise everybody in the next few events. So now we got to talk about the big 3. Of course, we got FaZe, we got Empire, and we got the Huntsmen. And they were the top 3 moving into this weekend. They were the most anticipated matches moving forward into this weekend. I really enjoyed these matches and thought they were really fun to watch. And we learned so much in both of them. So in my mind, they totally lived up to the expectations. The Huntsmen Empire match was shocking. I mean, we saw how hyped Scump got at the end of that match. He was all in on beating Crim, and you could really see it meant a lot to him, which was really cool. It wasn't fake at all. and Formal was pumped as well. And so Huntsmen looked dangerous. They looked really, really good, and they came out and really made a statement. And then you move forward with the Huntsmen and you look at that OpTic match, and there was just no contest for the most part. They took them out back and gave them the full beatdown because it's hard to compete with that roster. The usage of Gunless is really, really interesting, and this is something that I saw on the Reddit today as well, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I was thinking. Gunless now, he's moving out of that Slayer role, which kind of makes sense with how this roster is built, and into more of an OBJ apparently style role, where he's really playing the objective, rotating and trying to win those spawns, and overall playing debatably the most crucial role for a team. And he did it to a T. I really think this roster is dangerous. In that Reddit thread, Karma replied and said how annoying it is to play against because they have Envoy, they have Arcides, and they have Gunless, who are all really, really, really good on the rotations. Like we were talking about on the podcast, if you're watching this, or like I was talking about last week, I fully expect the Huntsmen to be a really, really good respawn team moving forward. So it'll totally depend how their search and destroy game develops over time and if they can stay up to par with that. I'm expecting they're going to be solid, but we'll see how they stack up against the competition long term. But when it comes to Empire, it's a tough discussion because of course they played the two best teams in the league. They're 0-2, so it's hard to debate where they currently are at in the power rankings. You know, I'm sure we're going to talk about this on the podcast. I'll probably talk about it more this weekend and into next week moving into London. I still think Dallas is probably the third best team in the league. I mean, they got caught off guard. It was Shotzi's and Illy's first go at a main stage appearance on a team like that with fans, and in this situation, I'm sure they're going to be fine. I mean, if you guys didn't see, Crimsix ranted in that little post-game press conference. By the way, I love these press conferences, so I really, really hope that they keep bringing them back because I love seeing these players' reactions right after the games, and it gives you good insight and actual real like content about how they were playing and like their real actual thoughts compared to like a on-stage interview with like one player, because it's just like, how are you feeling about this event? And I was like, oh, I was feeling good. Useless. But these interviews were awesome, and Crimsix ranted.
Are you doing this after the matches? Marcus, I'm not doing one of these after match ever. Alright, I feel like talking now. IW, you guys put out a patch in under 2 weeks before an event. I strongly urge that we do not play on it. I know that this one fixed everything, but in other esports, like to do what we did is considered a joke. So, IW, get your together.
So the whole argument about the patch really affecting their gameplay, kinda iffy. I mean, of course, everybody had that same experience. I totally understand that like the Empire benefited the most from that pre-patch existence, and so it probably hurt them the most to lose some of that. But at the same time, everybody had to adapt. So maybe they were just slow at adapting, and it's just not their biggest trait or their best trait. So I can totally understand that. I'm going to give them some slack for this tournament, and their young guns kind of let them down a little bit in this first event. So I'm going to give them some slack. I think they're going to be totally fine moving forward. Within a few weeks, they'll be right back on track to being one of the best teams. But at the end of the day, FaZe kicked the absolute crap out of them, and FaZe looked incredible overall in both their matches. You have to have FaZe as the #1 team right now. Their roster's stacked, and Simp still looks like the best player in the game. He was absolutely on fire all weekend. At the end of the day, you are crazy if you don't have FaZe as the #1 team. Simp, Abezy, Celium, Major Maniac, and Priesta. That roster is all around 5 fantastic players. Like what, Celium's their 4th best player? No other team in the league has a player as good as Celium as their 4th best player. Like the only team that has the argument is the Huntsmen, so I could see that argument go down there. But as a team, the team that plays the best as a squad, it's gotta be Atlanta right now. They look like they look like a force, and all the teams are very, very happy that they're not going to be at London in 2 weeks, because let's be honest, all of them would be terrified. We could talk so much more about this event, and of course, we're going to talk about it on the podcast coming out on Wednesday, and tomorrow I'll be posting another video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop all of your opinions down below. I know you guys got your opinions, so shoot them my way, and I'll be active in the comments replying to them and everything else. So as always, guys, I really, really do appreciate your guys' support. Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Discord, hit me up on Instagram to talk some competitive Call of Duty, and hit me up on the streams, little plug here, twitch.tv/SalvationsElite, and we'll talk to you later. But as always, I'm your boy Salvations Elite, and we'll see you next time. I'm out.